you with financial services.
Hey, Minnesota sports fans. This is your local State Farm agent, Tony Hoaglund. I need you all to ask yourselves this question. If you're in an at-fault car accident and you are sued for $700,000, how much of that $700,000 will my current insurance company pay? If you are unsure or can't answer all $700,000, you need to give us a call. State Farm has been number one in car insurance since World War II and number one in homeowners insurance since 1964. For a no-obligation review of your current policies, call us at 763-421-4900 or check out our website at www.champlininsurance.com.
All right, let's get to the draft. Really not that much time now. We've been through the speculative stage, the vetting stage, the watch players on fields. We're in short stage. Now, Tim, it is the lying stage of the NFL draft.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much talk about, what is Arizona going to do with that number one pick? Are they going to draft Kyler Murray and trade Josh Rosen? Would they keep both of them, or do they go with a different direction? And all of that matters to the Vikings because it's always this domino effect. So if Kyler Murray goes early, Josh Rosen is traded, maybe that devalues some of the other quarterbacks, and another team that needs a quarterback, suddenly doesn't because they have Josh Rosen on their roster. So it all kind of matters, but you just don't know what to believe at this point. I look at it from, okay, if the Vikings are at 18, and if they stay there, which, in my opinion, there are so many players that are relatively close that if they have offers at 18 and a couple of their, I would say, elite prospects are gone at that point, then I could see them trading down. But when I look at it, obviously, offensive line, the top need of the Vikings. But there are a lot of similar players there where if at 18, a guy like Ed Oliver, somebody who's been compared to Aaron Donald and John Randall is there, the Vikings also still have a need at the three technique. Shamar Stephen can play it, but if they're looking for somebody to really be a disruptor in the pass rush from the three technique, Ed Oliver would be a guy that I would be very interested in if I were the Vikings. It's just a matter of, does he even make it out of the top 10? And that's all going to depend on other teams' needs, their evaluation of him. Does he fit their kind of defense? I think he would fit the Vikings defense very well. And so, unless there is one of the top two offensive tackles there, Jawan Taylor and Jonah Williams, I think that they have to look at either trading down or maybe they end up with one of the offensive linemen who's just kind of similar to a bunch of the other offensive linemen.
It's an interesting draft for defensive linemen and tight ends, and there are two from Iowa that might be nice complementary pieces if they fall into the right spot in the draft.
Yeah, and to me it's really interesting that one team has the top two tight ends in the draft, and Noah Fant was a guy that was sort of the star up until last year, and it seems like you don't know if it was attitude issues or performance or lack of effort. I don't know, but I found it strange that his playing time and usage as a pass catcher seemed to decrease a little bit in 2018, and TJ Hawkinson became the big guy there. So, I think maybe both of them are pretty well-rounded tight ends where they can stretch the field. They're good pass catchers, but they're also considered pretty good blockers as well. And, I've disagreed with people that have said, okay, it's time to move on from Kyle Rudolph, or he's too expensive. They should look to trade him and get some cap space back. I still think Rudolph is a very good tight end, maybe not great, but very good. And I think he fits what they want to do. But we also have him in the final year of his contract. He has said that he is more than willing to extend his contract and perhaps give them more cap space. But I think that the Vikings would be wise to wait until after the draft before making any of those types of move, even with Adam Thielen's contract, until you know what you have in the draft and then you move forward. Now, in Thielen's case, he's going to be here. I'm not saying that, hey, they should look to move on from him, but if you do have a tight end at 18 who you really believe is a huge difference maker, I would not be opposed to them drafting Noah Fant or TJ Hawkinson and having both them and Rudolph on the roster. And then next year, with Rudolph's contract, I guess you just let him go to free agency if your draft pick pans out to be a legitimate number one tight end.
So they have position flexibility, that famous NFL modern term. Should they be drafting a guard or a tackle? Let's say there's a guard and a tackle. They're both about the same ability available to them in the first, second round, whatever. Which position should they draft?
And that's what I struggle with, because to me, guard is a much bigger need. They have said, okay, we could move Riley Reiff into guard, but that's, to me, always a bit of a crapshoot, because Zimmer admitted that they haven't even taken a look at what Reiff can do at guard. He's always been a tackle for them. And so it would be a bit of a roll of the dice. I'm sure he would be better than what they had last year, but frankly, Mike Remmers was much better at tackle, and they tried to move him to guard, and he couldn't really make that transition as smoothly as they hoped. I always think that tackles are worth more. I think the contracts prove that out. So if there are similarly talented guys between tackle and guard in the draft, then I think you lean toward tackle and just try to take the risk with Riley Reiff. And that doesn't necessarily mean that tackle that they draft has to be a left tackle, because they have admitted that, Brian O'Neill got pretty comfortable at right tackle, but they think he's got the footwork to be able to handle left tackle as well. If they draft a tackle, though, it could be the final year for Riley Reiff. I haven't really looked at his contract and how much it would cost in dead money if they would release him after this season. But, I love what Jonah Williams does as an offensive tackle. If he's there at 18, I think he's an easy pick. If it's Andre Dillard, he's very athletic, and I think he would be a good pick. But if it's Andre Dillard versus Chris Lindstrom, who's a guard, I probably go Dillard just because I think tackle is a better value at that pick. But they have some flexibility, but I'm not completely sold on the idea of Riley Reiff as a guard until I see him there.
Yeah, it seems odd to me. I mean, I guess it's good that he could possibly play there. I'm not sure that's the way you want to bet your season on, is that he's just automatically going to step in the guard and things are going to go great. I don't know. You would like some sure things on that line. You're not going to have 5 sure things, but you'd like 4 sure things on that line.
It's really kind of the position they've put themselves in, because they didn't do enough last year in free agency in the draft to come into it with saying, okay, we've got what we think could be 5 starters, but now if we draft somebody in the first round, now we have 6 potential starters and we can have a bunch of really good competition there. At this point, to me, it looks like, okay, they might have 4 starters on that offensive line, and they have to draft an offensive lineman for sure in the first 3 rounds, probably in the first 2 rounds, to say, okay, we have a starting lineup. I mean, at this point, last week they signed Dakota Dozier, and he might have a chance to compete for the left guard spot, because they just don't have anybody at this point. And really, he should be a backup guy that offers them a game or 2 here or there if needed for injury. And that's probably what he'll end up being. But at this point, they are just so short of starting offensive linemen that their hand is really forced to come away after the draft with at least 1, if not 2, potential starters on the offensive line.
Absolutely. Reminder, we have a deal with Bite Squad. First delivery fee waived if you use the promo code TALKNORTH, all caps, 1 word. But, once you get past that, just use Bite Squad, because it's a great service. They will bring food right to your door. It'll be just like you would get it from a waiter or a waitress at a restaurant. You don't have to drive. You don't have to do dishes. You don't have to cook. You have to wait in line. You have to pay for parking. They make life really easy. With the Final Four, we used it, and with Masters Week and baseball season starting, especially with Masters Week, you just get to sit in front of your big screen and eat restaurant quality food without having to make any effort. Get the Bite Squad app and put your information on that. You can pay very easily. It's just an easy way to go about it. Bitesquad.com or on the Bite Squad app. So there are a bunch of visits. I don't really buy into the fact that, if somebody visits, that makes them a likely target, but there are some intriguing people visiting.
Well, and I don't know if people remember back when the Vikings ended up drafting Kevin Williams, but everybody was led to believe that Jimmy Kennedy was going to be the guy, and even Jimmy Kennedy was led to believe that he was going to be the guy for the Vikings. And it was an absolute smokescreen. The Vikings put that out there. I think Mike Tice was playing the game beautifully, the lying game that goes on before the draft. But, I mean, if you are looking at some of the key visits, each team is allowed 30 pre-draft visits. The Vikings did that last week. Noah Fant, who I mentioned, the Iowa tight end, was among them. Cody Ford, a nice tackle guard who's probably a first-round pick among them. Greg Little, a tackle, is a guy that I would say is probably more of a late first-round, early second-round guy, was among them. But let's say he does fall to the Vikings pick in the second round. I think he could be a possibility. And Amani Hooker, the safety from Iowa, who's probably a mid-round pick, somewhere between third and fifth round, I would say, for Amani Hooker. And then a bunch of the rest of the guys that they had are kind of day three guys who you look to as, potential depth draft picks, or even a couple of guys that might not be drafted, but they would look to bring in as priority free agents.
I just don't know that we need the headline, Hooker visits Vikings.
Fred Smoot would be happy with that.
Yes, he will. No, hookers. Fred would need the plural. And they have to be from Chicago or Atlanta.
Yeah, Atlanta. Matt Burke would need to be sure that these were all Minnesota guys that they're bringing in then.
Hometown pride, baby. All right, let's hit a few more notes here. Again, check out TalkNorth.com for shows on just about anything you might be interested in. Michael Russo, Jeff Diamond, John Krasinski, Cheryl Reeve. Of course, the Viking Update Show, Roy Smalley on baseball. We have the best lineup in town. George Aloka, Matt Castle, Michael Mauti, and George Johnson are, finish the sentence.
They have participated in the NFL Broadcast Boot Camp, which Iloka was, to me, a really interesting guy to talk to last year. Very well spoken, and he wasn't going to put himself in a bind by saying too much, but I think he was very honest with his assessments of different things. So I love talking to him. I could completely see him ending up in a broadcast booth, and he's the guy that went to this broadcast boot camp last year that the NFL puts on. This year, he was one of 6 guys that went to sort of an advanced version of that, where James Brown, the NFL studio host, was there to kind of offer advice to guys one-on-one with what they can do differently in their technique. Matt Castle, very well spoken. I don't know how exciting he would be as a broadcaster.
God, he's boring as a player.
Yeah, and kind of in that same realm when talking to him too. But sometimes that's not so surprising when you have a veteran quarterback in the NFL. They tend to be a little bit boring at times. Michael Mauti, I thought, was excellent to talk to when he was here, an excitable guy who I think would bring a lot of energy to a broadcast. Didn't really get to know George Johnson all that well when he was here, but I think it was 33 different NFL players attended this thing last week, and so I thought it was worth noting that 4 of those ex-Vikings were among those guys, and just give a little take on what I think they could bring to a broadcast in the future.
So you're saying there will be broadcasters in the future that are not former Dallas Cowboys?
Well, Iloka is with the Cowboys now, so
Good point. Then he's got the job. He's in.
Yeah, exactly. I know. It is kind of amazing, isn't it, how many of those guys are out there?
Man. So Carl Eller and Steve Jordan will announce the picks in the second, third rounds. That's a nice touch.